All right, hi everyone. This video is about trophic levels. So in ecosystems, everything that's in an ecosystem, all the living things, all the plants, all the animals, they all need energy to be able to survive. And that energy has to come from somewhere. Okay, so all energy starts off in the sun or in the earth there are some ecosystems where there is no sunlight, like for instance, the bottom of the ocean. There's no sunlight down there. So there are other sources of energy for those ecosystems down there. However, in this video, we're just going to talk about ecosystems that exist on the surface of the earth where there is sunlight. Okay, so for those ecosystems, all the energy starts in the sun, and the sun is constantly producing a massive amount of energy in the form of light and heat. So that light and heat energy radiates through space, hits the earth, and organisms on the surface of the earth absorb the sunlight and convert sunlight energy into chemical energy, and those are plants. So we know that plants turn sunlight energy into chemical energy, which is just food. If I say chemical energy, I'm just saying it's a molecule. And when I say molecule, I'm talking about food molecules, which we call glucose. Okay, so plants take light energy, turn it into chemical energy, in other words, glucose. And then the energy gets passed on from those plants into animals that eat the plant. So animals, like herbivores, they come by, they eat the plant, and they steal the energy from the plant, and then they use it for their own purposes. But there would be no energy to steal if there were no plants making energy or converting sunlight energy into a form that the animal could steal. Okay, so energy is what we're talking about. And more specifically, we're talking about trophic levels. Okay, so the word troph or trough, T-R-O-P-H, means energy. So when we say trophic levels, we're talking about energy levels, and we're talking about how energy is passed through an ecosystem once the producers, the plants, turn the sunlight energy into food energy. Animals will eat the plant to get the energy and steal the energy and use it for their own purposes. Other animals will eat those animals to steal the energy for their own purposes. And then other animals still will steal the energy from those animals, which stole it from this animal, which stole it from these plants, which got it from the sun. Okay. But none of this happens unless we can convert sunlight energy into food energy. And the only things that can do that on Earth are these things that we call producers. Okay, so trophic levels are when you go from one thing to the thing that ate that thing to the thing that ate that thing. Every time something eats something else, you go up a trophic level. Okay, so everything in this level eats the things below it. This level eats the things below it. This level eats the things below it, and so on and so forth. So we're going to talk about how energy is passed through these ecosystems. I mean, we already know that the way that it's passed is whenever things eat something else, that's how it gets passed on. But if you were to look at the, if you were to look at the, if you were to look at energy pyramids, this is how they would look like, or these trophic levels, if I were to draw them out, this is how they would look. So again, all the energy starts in the sun and it travels to the earth, and producers turn that light energy into chemical energy. So the size of these boxes represents how much energy is in that level. So you have a lot of energy here, and once the herbivores, which are the animals that eat plants, once they steal the energy from the producers, well, you'll notice that there's less energy in this level than in the level below it. And every time you go up a level, to the animals that eat the herbivores that ate the plants, or the animals that ate the animals that ate the herbivores that ate the plants. You see that the blocks get smaller. That's because there's less and less energy available at each level. So where does this energy go? Well, it gets lost in the form of heat. So every time a herbivore eats a plant, they're only getting about 10% of the energy from the plant. And when the animal eats the herbivore that ate the plant, that animal is only getting about 10% of the energy that was in the herbivore, which is only about 10% of the energy that was in the plant. Okay? And so on and so forth. And so it goes down by 90%. 90% of the energy is lost as you go from one level to the next to the next. And the way that it's lost is in the form of heat. So you're going to have to remember the 10% rule, okay? Only 10% of the energy gets passed on from one level to the next. And the other 90% that's lost is lost in the form of heat. And producers are always at the bottom. And the reason that they're at the bottom is because they have the most energy, because they are getting all their energy straight from the source, sun, and they are where the energy originates in an ecosystem. You take that out, everything above it collapses, just like if it were a real pyramid. Okay. So for example, here in trophic level 1, which is what we call the bottom level, this is where the producers are. If there's 1,000 joules of energy, that J there, that means joule. And a joule is just a unit of measurement of energy. Just like pounds is a measurement of weight, joules is a measurement of energy. Okay, so I could say something weighs 100 pounds, or I could say this thing has 1,000 joules. Okay, it's just how much of it there is. So if there's 1,000 joules in trophic level 1, only 10% or 1/10 of that energy will go into the next level. So there's only going to be 100 joules of energy available at this level. And of that 100 joules, only 1/10 or 10% of that will be passed on to the next, so on and so forth. So there'll only be 10 joules of energy available at trophic level 3 and 1 joule of energy available at trophic level 4. Now you can't have more organisms in a level than you have energy to support them. So you cannot have 200 joules worth of organisms in this level because there's only 100 joules of energy available. Everything in the world is energy. Everything runs on energy, and you can't have more stuff than you have energy to make that stuff. It's impossible. So you have to work with the amount of energy that you have available in that level. Okay? That's why every time you go up a level, there's fewer and fewer animals in that level. So for instance, with the rabbits, you can't have more rabbits than you have grass. Well, like, how do you measure grass? Is one blade of grass grass? Do you count all the individual blades of grass? No, what you do is you measure this thing that's called biomass. So biomass is how much, if you were to take all the organisms in that level and add them all up, their weight, how much would they weigh? So you can't have more biomass in this level than you have in this level. Because in order to have biomass, which is just me, if I weigh 200 pounds, well, I have to have enough energy to create 200 pounds of meat and bone, okay? I can't have more meat and bone tissue on my body than I have energy available to me. So the more energy you have, the more biomass you can create and the more organisms you can support. So there will be more biomass of grass and the plants and all the trees than there will be herbivores that eat all those plants and trees. So when you go up a level, you're going to have fewer snakes than you have rabbits. Why? Because you have less energy available to make snakes, to support their bodily functions with energy from the food that they eat, which is them. You'll have less hawks. So you may have a giant field of grass and you may have 100 rabbits, but you'll only be able to have 10 snakes and maybe one hawk. Because if you have 1/10 of the energy, you can only have 1/10 of the biomass, right? There are some cases where you can have more individuals in this level than you have in this level. An example would be insects and an oak tree. So if you have like a giant tree, think of an oak tree. I mean, oak, they're huge. A mature oak tree is huge, right? And let's say, though, that you have these teeny tiny little insects that feed on this oak tree. Well, you may have 1,000 insects that feed on this tree. So it's not necessarily the number of organisms. Again, it's how much do all those organisms weigh. So if you have 1,000 insects in one oak tree, the insects are in this level and the oak tree is in this level. So I do have more individuals because I have 1,000 insects eating on one oak tree. However, if I add up all 1,000 of those insects together, how much they weigh comes nowhere close to what this oak tree weighs. So the biomass of all these tiny little insects added together come nowhere near the biomass of this one single oak tree, okay? So don't necessarily think of this in terms of the number of organisms in each level. Instead, think about how much those organisms would weigh. One big organism would be the same biomass as 1,000 small ones, okay? And in that case, you may only have one organism in that level, or you could have 1,000 just depending on what the organisms are. Is it a polar bear? Or is it tiny little fish? What is it? So that makes a difference. So don't think that you can't have more organisms in this level. You can, but you cannot have more biomass in this level than you do in the levels below it, okay? Another thing you need to know is that as you go up these levels, when you reach the top, the organisms that are at the top of that respective food chain are what we call apex predators. Okay, so the apex predator means that they are at the top of the food chain and there is nothing in that ecosystem. I'm not saying there's nothing in the world, I'm just saying there's nothing in that particular ecosystem where this apex predator lives that eats that predator. They're at the top of the food chain in that ecosystem. Now, another thing, the last thing that I need to tell you is that if all this energy just went from one level to the next, to the next, to the next, you would eventually run out of energy. But this energy doesn't go to waste, it actually gets recycled. So there's these other organisms that are extremely important to this ecosystem as a whole. And these things are called decomposers. So decomposers are things like fungi, worms, or bacteria. These organisms once all these things die, because everything that's alive will eventually die. The grass will eventually die, the rabbits, the snakes, the hogs will all eventually die. And when they die, all that energy that's left over in their bodies doesn't just go to waste, it gets recycled back into the ecosystem. And these guys, the fungi, the worms, and the bacteria, are the ones that do that, these decomposers. Okay, they're extremely important for taking all the nutrients from all of these organisms. Okay, they take all these things and put them back into the soil so that these plants, the producers at the bottom, can take the energy in the soil, combine it with the energy in the sun, and then start this cycle all over again. Okay, so it makes a closed loop of energy that's self-sustaining. So the energy is recycled, but that wouldn't be able to happen if it weren't for these decomposers, which are extremely important. So decomposers are actually not in one single level. Decomposers are present on every single level because they feast on everything once it's dead and put those nutrients back at the starting point so it can start all over again. And that is all that you need to know for now for trophic levels.